It's good to see you, Michael. Bright and early. Moshe, you feeling good?
No.
Huh?
They're fine.
Okay. Exciting times. So the truth is, I had to prepare for class, so I watched that movie we talked about.
Okay.
It's not something that I can just show you during class.
Oh, it's not serious.
No, it's very tznius.
Oh.
It's very violent, even though it's all paintings and narration. Very dramatic, very dramatic. It's a longer story. It's maybe for another time. Definitely for an event. There's no English subtitles, so I'd have to translate the whole thing for you, and it's quite intricate. It's very powerful movie. It's called Agadat HaChurban, and it tells the story of the destruction. We touched upon it briefly, that, we said that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was in Jerusalem under siege with this group of Biryonim, the Talmud calls them ruffians, and the infighting between the Jews ultimately caused them to burn their own storehouses of food. Remember, we talked about this. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, they do that he fakes his death, and they carry him out of the city walls, and then he meets the general. They change some things in the way the Talmud records it. But again, there's very little that we know. It's 2,000 years ago. We don't really have proper history written about it. We have a little bit from the Talmud. We have some stories. But as you can see, the stories that we read yesterday in Midrash, there's a kernel of history there. There's a truth. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yehoshua, but all these miracles, and it's all a narrative which was written for an educational purpose. We also have from Josephus, known as Josephus Flavius. He was a Jew who was a turncoat, essentially a traitor to the Jewish people. And he realized that the Romans are going to win, and so he became a Roman, and he became their historian. He wrote the history for the sake of the Romans. And so obviously, everything's colored by that. He tells about this same time period, and he describes, we have the best descriptions we have of the Beit HaMikdash and the service, how they sacrificed the animals, and what Yom Kippur looked like with the rows upon rows of Kohanim handing the blood to each other in a very aesthetic fashion. That's all from Josephus. So we have a lot to be thankful for, that we have at least some record, but to say that we know precisely exactly how each event took place and who was guilty and who was at fault, it's hard to know. So this movie, which just came out last year, they dramatize it in a very unique fashion. It's very powerful. But again, I don't know that it's material that we have to teach, and then that'll be in your head as the gospel, the truth. We do know the Jews were fighting within each other, and that they did sort of call in the Romans, and the fact that they revolted, it was known as the Great Revolt, that around, the year 70, ultimately the Romans came over and they destroyed Jerusalem. And we know that Titus was the one who took the temple vessels to the Arch of Titus in Rome. And, so we know what happened, and we know that the Jews were fighting with each other in their different groups. We talked about the different groups in the Second Temple era, and the Hasmoneans, and corruption in the temple, and so it's a beautiful dramatization of that. But I don't think I want to spend it's an hour and a half movie. I don't want to spend the whole class on that. We'll find the time to do it. Yeah. It's on YouTube. I'll send you a link. Yeah, the Hebrew is actually very slow, and there's subtitles in Hebrew you can read while you hear it. You might be confused a little bit if you sit with somebody who can explain. It's okay. Sure. Yeah, I'll send you a link.
You put it on the group chat.
Great. Is everybody here in the group chat?
Yes.
It's the same old group chat?
I don't know. What group chat? What's it called? Weinberg share, I think. Okay. Thank you. True.
We change every semester. We change the group.
Sometimes it depends if the students change. Yeah. Well, we're all here, so why? we needed it a lot when there was Corona times, and we were communicating in other ways. Anyways, but this is we've moved on already. Yesterday
Did we discuss or talk about Bar Kochva?
so we're getting there. We sort of filled in the gaps between the destruction of Jerusalem. It's the beginning of the period of the sages. We talked about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai being the first generation. It's still on the board of the Tanaim. And we know what that means, right? The Tanaim, the first generation of the first half of the period of Chazal, our sages of blessed memory. So the first generation, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he asks to save Yavne and its sages. And he asks to save Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, the president, right? And the third request was for? They don't do the three requests. They only have one request in the movie. But they change it a little bit from the Talmudic story. The third request was? You know this, guys. You know this.
Yeah, Gamaliel.
So Rabban Gamliel we
Rabban
mentioned
Gamaliel, yeah.
to be the line, the Davidic line of the presidents they asked for. That's we said. But what's the third? We mentioned that already. No, that's the second. We said Yavne and its sages, number one.
The one who was sick, that he got a doctor, was the second.
That's we didn't say today. So you're right. Rabbi Tzadok, a doctor for Rabbi Tzadok. That is the third request. Yefeh. In any case, Jerusalem was destroyed. The sages continue, and they developed this in Yavne. They continue the chain of the Torah Sheba'al Peh and the Academy of Study. So yesterday we continued and we had a discussion between Rabban Gamliel and his disciples in the second generation, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Hoshua, the famous oven of Achnai, some kind of a temporary or dissembled and portable oven, and what the rules are, and they were so adamant, everyone sticking to his position, that the end of it is, of course, Rabbi Yeshua and the sages saying, "Lo b'shamayim hi." We don't have prophecy anymore, and we follow the majority of the sages. The power of the sages is present, ever present in this story, but the end of it, of course, the Talmud is giving us a message that Rabbi Eliezer was excommunicated, perhaps treated improperly, and that caused the death of Rabban Gamliel, his brother-in-law. All these sages were related to each other. We mentioned in the previous story too, by the way, that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was the brother-in-law with the leader of the ruffians, or the zealots, who were trying to protect Jerusalem. They all had the same goal, but they fought with each other, and ultimately,
how you call them in Ivrit, the zealous?
Kanaim or zealots, yes. Kuf nun aleph, yeah. Kana, like kina is jealousy, so yeah. Kanaim are the zealots, we say in English. Yefeh.
One time I was talking with someone and said zealots, but he was like, no, zealots.
Zealots is a Kanaim, the zealots, yeah. That's what they were called. And they participated, they were central into the destruction of Jerusalem, but ultimately they meant well. They wanted to defend Jerusalem, and they wanted to defend the temple service, but this was the end. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai felt, we saw that even the sages debated whether maybe he didn't ask for enough. If he could have maybe saved the temple. There's a criticism of him that how foolish was he that he didn't ask for Jerusalem to be saved. He asked for Yavne. Ultimately, perhaps, it's hard for us to judge in hindsight. We do know that Judaism survived. Judaism survived with the sages, even though the temple was destroyed. And that became the period of the Chazal, the beginning. This was the beginning of the period of Chazal, where we have the Tanaim, 5 generations, and then another 7 generations of Amoraim. We have a 500-year period of tremendous flourishing of the oral Torah, of Judaism as we know it. A boom of the oral Torah, a boom of Judaism as we know it. Okay, so this was the period we started discussing. We talked about the beginning, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Then we get to, we saw that Rabbi Akiva was sent. Poor Rabbi Akiva, they sent the young student to tell Rabbi Eliezer, right? Because they were all afraid what's going to happen. He did it, he showed some wisdom. And Rabbi Akiva, let's talk about him a little bit because we are getting close to Lag BaOmer, and we've mentioned it in passing. You might have heard of Rabbi Akiva. There's a youth group. There's a youth group of religious youth in Israel, all around the world. It's called Bnei Akiva, right? The Children of Akiva. He became a model for all time for Jewish youth. And Akiva was, of course, one of the central, perhaps the central Tana of the Tanaitic era of Chazal. And his teaching became legendary. Many of his teachings are recorded. It starts off with the story that Akiva actually, I believe he was descendant from Gerim. Akiva himself was the son of a convert, I believe. And he grew up totally unlettered. He was not a scholar. At the age of 40, he was he saw a sight. These are stories that you might have heard before, but we'll try to put them all together and try to put them in the framework. He saw a sight of water dripping upon a stone, and he saw that the stone had given way. There was an indent in the stone. And he said to him, wow, water? What's stronger, a rock or water? Of course the stone is stronger, but we see that this little drip onto the water over the years, over time,
It's like if
it can actually move stone.
If water can over time destroy stone, pierce through stone.
Yes?
Then perhaps over time the Torah can pierce through my heart.
Exactly, my thick skull or my heart. And he said it's never too late. He actually, there's a romance story. His wife's name, anybody recall? His wife's name was Rachel. Rachel supported him and said that she wants him to go to study and to become a scholar. And to make a long story short, ultimately, he did. He became one of the greatest Tanaim ever. And I want to show you some books, but I'll leave that. Let's continue with Rabbi Akiva for a little bit. Rabbi Akiva, we know that he became such a great teacher that he had, the Talmud says, 12,000 pairs of students. Sum total, 24,000. And they all died. We mentioned it the other day. They all died in this period, in a short period between Pesach and Shavuot, or half a month before Shavuot, which works out to be Lag BaOmer, that 2 weeks before Shavuot. They all died in this period. The Talmud gives, again, the moral explanation, the philosophical explanation, not the physical, historical circumstance. So the Talmud says, because lo nahagu kavod ze bazeh, they didn't act with respect to each other, honor to each other. They didn't show each other honor. And on the heels of the story we just discussed about the infighting between the Jews that caused the destruction of the temple in year 70. So this is 100 years later, 60 years later even. We know precisely the years at around, I think it's 133 there was during this time. So there was lots of. One second. How many students did he have? What did we say? How many?
4,000.
Right, which is 12,000 pairs. For some reason, the Talmud records it was 12,000 pairs. What did I teach you about numbers?
They're all really important.
They're all important. I taught you more than that.
We shouldn't count.
No, I didn't say they don't count.
So you shouldn't count.
Oh, you're not supposed to count people. You're not supposed to count people. No, but what I didn't teach you that. What did I teach you about numbers? 12 is a good one, meaning, right? We said also 40 is a good one, right? But we said
10.
no. But what did I teach you? There's symbolism to these numbers. It's not a statistic. It's not a book of history of statistics. What's 12? The 12 tribes. We spoke about 12 showbreads, right? 12 tribes. So 12,000 students probably meant the students were basically all of the scholars from the entire Israel. They were all the students of Rabbi Akiva. Pairs, usually couples get together and they create fruition. They create continuity. Here, what happens? They all die. The entire educational effort of the scholarship of Rabbi Akiva's students was cut off, was destroyed. We mentioned there's a few theories. Some people say it was a plague. Some people say they died in the war. Now, what war? Here we have to talk about the next war. So about 60 years after year 70, brings us to year 130. 130. Around 130. There was a fellow who led the Jews. Of course, they were under Roman rule. They were, of course, Jerusalem was destroyed, but the Jews still remained, and they tried to, continue living. They had to pay heavy taxes to the Romans, but they rebelled. It was very hard for them, and obviously they wanted independence throughout. And they tried to. The Great Revolt, of course, is what caused the destruction of the temple in the year 70. 60 years later, the Second Revolt. This revolt is known as the Bar Kochva Revolt. There was a fellow by the name of Shimon Bar Kochva was his name. And most of the rabbis called him Shimon Bar Kochva. Kochva in Hebrew means the one who disappoints. They thought he was a false leader. They thought it was a mistake. Some of them thought that it was a mistake to revolt against the Romans. It didn't work in year 70. What is it going to work now? He said, we can't take it anymore. We have to have independence. The Romans are weak. And he chose wisely. There was a period, a lull in who was the ruler over Judea. And Shimon Bar Kochva, he declared independence. This was the last independence which we had. This is after the Second Temple time. Right, this is in the year 135, in the middle of the period of the sages, at the time of Rabbi Akiva. That's why I'm telling you this story. Shimon Bar Kochva. So the sages, a lot of sages called him Kozva, the disappointing one, the leader who was not going to be give us any hope really, but other rabbis, including primarily Rabbi Akiva, believed in him. They supported this revolt, the rebellion of Bar, and what did they call him? Bar Kochva. Kochva from a star. Kochav is star. And it says in the book of Bamidbar, in the prophecy of Bilam, the prophet, Darach Kochav miYaakov v'kam shevet Yisrael. There's going to be a star coming out of Judea from Jacob. And he will have independence. He'll have sovereignty. Unbelievable. So, what is he supports Bar Kochva? Now we have some historical record of what happened during the revolt. We actually have been finding more and more. Last month, right near Tekoa, where I live, and I'll send you a link to a news item that they made with the archaeologists. Where you were some of you were in Tekoa, and in the valley, it's called the Tekoa Valley, there's caves. We mentioned some of the caves, of course, where the terror incident we mentioned the last week. This is the week, actually, of their Yortzeit, of the two boys that were killed in one of the caves. But in another cave, there's caves throughout the valley, the Tekoa Valley, and they were originally formed. They were used as for priests to meditate. What's that called? Like a monastery type of thing. So the Haritun, Saint Haritun, he was a Christian leader who gathered people that wanted to meditate and become holy and go out to the desert, and they lived in these caves very, simply, and they meditated. He was a famous leader. They're known as the Haritun caves. Anyways, these caves, they're there, but they're very hard to get to. Only recently, a fellow who lives in Tekoa, an archaeologist lives in Tekoa, together with another archaeologist, professors at Bar University and others, they mapped out the caves once again. They've been already excavated, but they mapped them out once again, and they found two particular caves with a lot of artifacts. And they just found in one of those caves a coin from the Bar Kochva Revolt. One of the things you do when you declare independence from the Roman ruler is, who makes the money? The ruler, the sovereign. So they were using Roman tetradrachmas, they're called. Right? It has 4 drachmas in it, in Hebrew. So what they did is they took those coins. You could make the coins yourself out of silver or whatever it is, or you could take the coins that were minted by the Roman Empire and stamp over on top of it a new picture, a new shape. And what does it say? And Bar Kochva, during his revolt, they minted coins. And we found such other coins in many places around the country. We'll talk a little bit about the Bar Kochva. We could call it the Bar Kochva country, the state that he started to create, and for a couple of years they survived. They minted the coins. The coins has on one side, it has a picture of the Beit HaMikdash. They wanted to rebuild the temple. And inside, there's columns, and inside you can see the showbread, those 12 breads we were talking about. And on top of it is a star, perhaps Bar Kochva, a star representing his leadership. And you can see in the back, on the edges, the old Roman coin that used to be. You can see a little bit of the hair of, this Roman wigs, with like the Emperor Julius. I think it was Augustus at the time. Augustus was the empire. And on the other side, you can see, I'm trying to remember now, you'll see it in the clip. I'll send it to you in just after class. They see, I think it's the Arba Minim, the 4 species from Sukkot. And one of the letters, we found letters, I mentioned to you the other day, the Qumran caves in the Dead Sea, where we have those scrolls from the sects in the Second Temple period. Also there we found letters of Bar Kochva, hundreds of years later. Those caves were used and reused by the Jews throughout the centuries. Bar Kochva, we found letters written from Bar Kochva. Apparently he hid out in all these different places. The Romans had the numbers, but he knew the lay of the land. So he used his knowledge of the land to hide from the Roman armies. And he sent out secret letters to his battalions, his different groups of bands of rebels. And there he says, provide the Arba Minim. It was Sukkot. Make sure that we have enough lulav and etrog for all of our soldiers. It's fascinating. Some people say he was not such a great scholar, he wasn't a scholar. But Rabbi Akiva supported him. He thought this was, yes, we have to take back our country from these Romans. And on the other side, where it says these so it has pictures of the 4 species, and there's letters. The one they found in Tekoa just recently, Shin Bet, which means Shana Bet, the second year, Lecherut Yisrael, for the freedom of Israel. So they minted coins. They wanted to break free from the Roman Empire. Just 60 years after the temple was destroyed, they didn't give up hope. And the Bar Kochva band, the rebels, they used every place they could to fight against these Roman legions, which were swarming the country. And we have remnants of, in Herodian, for example, we mentioned Herodian, this palace near Tekoa, where Herod, who was during but while the temple stood, he built up the second temple, made it beautiful. So he had a palace there. It was reused again 100 years later by the rebels. 130 years later, 130 years after Herod, they dug tunnels underneath. They were big into digging tunnels that could store food, and they could hide and underground, where the Roman legions, of course, they made the tunnels very narrow and very, very shallow. Why? Because if you're a Roman soldier, you have all this armor. You can't get through. But if you're just a rebel, you don't have much armor, you can,
Guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla, you say like that?
Guerrilla warfare, absolutely. They use guerrilla warfare. Ultimately, Bar Kochva, they had a couple of years. I think it's 1/3 minus, not minus, we're already in plus. A year 130 to 135. And then ultimately Bar Kochva himself was killed. And the Bar Kochva rebellion was stamped out, and whoever was left, famously, a lot of Jews were gathered in which city that now got destroyed? Not Jerusalem.
Yavne.
No, not Yavne. Not Yavne. In Beitar. Also not far from where I live, in Gush Etzion, just south of Jerusalem, Beitar. And I don't know if you guys remember, we're going to repeat this in the summertime. Which day? 17th of Tammuz. One of the things we commemorate when we fast because of the destruction of the temple is the destruction of the city of Beitar, and thousands of Jews were slaughtered. And then we get to even further, a month later, in Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, in the summertime, we're going to celebrate. One of the things that we celebrate on the 15th of Av is that finally the permission was granted to bury the dead in Beitar. Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, after Tisha B'Av. A few days later, we have a semi-festival, a little bit of a festive day. One of the things that is mentioned is that all the martyrs who died in Beitar, the Bar Kochva Revolt, were permitted finally that they could get a Jewish burial. And
17th Tammuz to 15th of Av.
I don't know exactly when Beitar was destroyed.
Okay.
I think it could be. So it's a month. Tammuz to Av, it's a month. Only a month later did they allow them to bury the dead. And so Beitar, this is all part of the Bar Kochva Revolt. He showed, and Rabbi Akiva supported him because he had pride, and he tried to gain independence once again. Ultimately, we know that Rabbi Akiva himself was killed by the Romans, right? Many of the sages were killed by the Romans. Rabbi Akiva, the Romans really, they wanted to stamp out any rebellion, and they knew what's going to get the Jewish people. They said, no longer are you allowed to teach Torah publicly. And once upon a time, they found someone found Rabbi Akiva. One of his students said to him, "What are you doing, teaching Torah publicly? The Romans are going to get you. Why are you still sticking to this thing called Torah? all this Torah scholarship, the Mishnah, right? We said this is ultimately going to be collected in the Mishnah, and the Midrash, and in the Braitot, as we saw yesterday. Why are you doing this? And Rabbi Akiva told him the following story. He said, there's a story about a fox on the banks of the rivers. There's many stories about foxes, but this is one specifically attributed to Rabbi Akiva about this issue. And the fox went to the banks of the river, and he saw the fish swimming in schools from, that's what it's called, a group of fish. And they're scurrying from one side of the river to the other side of the river, to the upstream and downstream. And he said to these fish, what are you doing? He said, well, why are you moving here, there? He said, well, we're trying to escape the nets of the fishermen. So we move from place to place. We try to avoid trouble. Makes sense? So the fox said to them, fox is known as a wise man, right? So the fox, a wise being, not a wise man. And he says to them, I have a proposition for you. Why don't you come onto the shore? I'll come onto the banks of the river. There won't be any nets there. And the fish said, I don't know why they call you wise. The place where we naturally live, what's our natural habitat, is in the water. It's a kal v'chomer. It's a rabbinic reasoning. It's called a fortiori. It's a type of reasoning. If in the place where we are supposed to live, our natural habitat, we find ourselves in danger. If we leave our natural place, if we leave the ocean, the lake, the river, and we go on to the shore, isn't it more dangerous for us? It's more dangerous for you when you leave your natural habitat. This is what Rabbi Akiva answered. He said, I cannot. The Jewish people cannot live without Torah. We'll be like fish out of the sea, is an expression in English. Rabbi Akiva said, so I have to, even though I'm risking my life against the Roman persecution and their prohibition on the Jewish lifestyle, I have to teach Torah, and I have to keep on doing what I'm doing, because otherwise I'm not a Jew. Otherwise I'm not alive, and the Jewish people will not be alive. We have to be keeping the flame of Torah alive. And he continued. Ultimately, the Romans captured him and tortured him to death. But here we are, 2,000 years later, still speaking about Rabbi Akiva and celebrating him. And I'll take your questions in a few minutes. I just want to talk a little bit more about Rabbi Akiva and after the 12,000 pairs were killed. Some people say it was part of this revolt. Maybe they were the soldiers of Bar Kochva. Who knows? Some people say it was a plague. We don't know what it is, but there was definitely a major setback to Rabbi Akiva and his group of students. But he had 5 students. Some say when he realized that the first group was lost, he focused on these 5. He ordained them, the 5 students, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and most famously, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, were one of the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva, and we're going to talk about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his association with Lag BaOmer very soon. But Rabbi Akiva didn't give up, even though these 12,000 pairs were lost. He kept on. He teaching Torah. He ordained them. He managed to pass on the torch before he himself was killed. And then his students in the 4th generation, they were the major Tanaim in the next generation of Tanaim, until finally in the 5th generation, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi collects all the material, all the teachings into a new book called the Mishnah. Excellent. The 6 orders of the Mishnah. Okay, so just to place, you asked me about Bar Kochva and Rabbi, it fits right in. That's exactly, we're going to talk about Lag BaOmer in just a little bit, but I want to move ahead with you and show you a little bit about the Mishnah. Okay, but now I'll take questions if anybody wanted to ask. Yeah, Amos, yeah.
perhaps is a very and that coin you said that there wasn't from one side it was a star. What kind of star it was?
It was a six-pointed star. It wasn't Magen David.
Magen David is
Magen, it is. I have to. You'll see it in the. You'll see the coin in the video. There's been many coins found like this. This was just in Tekoa, so I'm very proud of it, and right near Tekoa, and it was just recently found. And so now we know that the Bar Kochva rebels used these caves as well as the caves of the Herodian and the caves in the Beit Shemesh area. There's many caves around the country, tunnels, systems, underground tunnels where we find remnants of the Bar Kochva rebels. And so we learn about them. Of course, we have some written history and some from the actual artifacts, archaeological digs, where we've dug up things from that era. Yes?
And you didn't mention the fifth student from Rabbi Akiva. You just
Rabbi Tarfon, I believe.
Tarfon?
I'm not sure. I want to double check. I have it here somewhere, but let me get back to you on that. I don't want to be misquoted. The fifth student, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and it's not Tarfon. It's can't recall right now. Okay, well, I'll get back to you. We'll get that. There were many Tanaim. There's hundreds. There's about 150 mentioned in the Talmud. I've given you the names of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? I'm going to add a few more. There will be 10 out of like 150. Tanaim. Only the Tanaim I'm talking about. These 200 years. There's so much material there because this is the golden era of the Jewish tradition being crystallized in the works of the Tanaim. Okay? We're going to talk about a few more Tanaim, but another question.
I can't find only the sheets in the Mishnah. These are the comments.
I have such a book. Why?
No, just if I can find.
Of course. Yeah. There's many editions of the Mishnah with commentaries of all kinds. As you can see on the table, this is a Mishnah. The Pirkei Avot, right? It's one part of the Mishnah. And there's commentaries here, 5 different commentaries. So there's Mishnah with no commentary also. And there's commentaries from 100 years ago, commentaries from 50 years ago, commentaries from 200 years ago, from ever since the Mishnah, from year 200 till 2020, we have commentaries on the Mishnah from the period of the Gaonim, period of the Rishonim, period of the Achronim. We've been studying this text ever since.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
Crazy to think about like a book that
One book it's so powerful that we still, of course, the Tanakh is one, and the Mishnah is another one. Now the Mishnah, many times it's not studied by itself, not because of the commentaries. Many times we see the Mishnah through a lens. Here, I have here. I think I have it here. I see you. Everything looks very bright. And I put these on. Whoa. Everything has a little bit of a tint, a lens on it, right? Everything's colored. Yes. You like that? It's a magnetic. I really like it. It's very easy. It's very easy. I can put it in my pocket. When I'm driving and going into a tunnel, I take them off. Take out the tunnel. So it's very nice. Anyways, what is the lens? What is the lens through which we see the Mishnah? Usually, primarily, not the commentaries, because there's so many different commentaries. What's the first layer that usually when we study the words of the Mishnah, the layer is the Gemara was written as an extension of the Mishnah. So it's not only the 6 orders of the Mishnah, 63 books, essentially, 63 sections. Masechtot, they're called, of the Mishnah. The Gemara was written and essentially overlaid on top of the Mishnah. So we look at the Mishnah through the discussions of the earliest commentators possible. They're not really commentators, though their words were collected in the Gemara. The Amoraim, they discussed all the Mishnayot and tried to analyze them. Sometimes they even changed them and said that the text we have is wrong, needs to be amended and fixed. The Amoraim, as I said, they're never going to go against the Mishnah, but they do discuss it at great length. Sometimes they're going to find a Braita, right? A Tannaitic teaching which didn't make it into the Mishnah. And they'll say, well, this Braita goes up, brings us another opinion of the Tanaim that goes against the Mishnah. But the Mishnah is one collection, the collection that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi put together, Rabbi put together, and he said, these Mishnayot are the most authoritative. But he can't cancel, no cancel culture here. He can't cancel out all the other teachings which didn't make it into the Mishnah. All the Braitot, you can find Braitot in the Tosefta, and also other words of the Tanaim in the Midrash.
So you can say the Sufta and the Midrash are the sources from with the teachings of the sages who didn't make it into the Mishnah.
Correct. That's right. Listen, the Midrash also has later periods. It has Amoraim as well in some Midrashim. But there's Midrash Tanaim, they're parallel. All these three are sources for Tannaitic material. The main text is the Mishnah, the Braitot, the outside Mishnayot, they're collected in the Tosefta, and Midrashim. We have Midrashim from Tanaim, we also have Midrashim from Amoraim, but there are many words of the Tanaim recorded in the Midrash, and I'm going to show you these books presently. But the first discussion of the Mishnah is the Gemara. And the Gemara gets collected and edited in, we call it the Talmud. And we said yesterday that there's actually two Talmuds. The Talmud from Bavli and Yerushalmi, or the Talmud of the land of Israel and the Talmud of Babylonia. The Palestinian Talmud, exactly. In Hebrew we call them Bavli, Babylonian, and Yerushalmi, usually the Jerusalem Talmud, Yerushalayim. Now, it's amazing that, I told you that they had some trouble after 5 generations. The Palestinian scholars had to stop. The Amoraim got cut off after 5 generations in the land of Israel. And so we don't have a complete commentary. The Gemara, we don't have Gemara on all 63 Masechtot.
You give
I'm going to give it to you again. Now.
In
Good.
Ryan, we only have brachos. Correct?
That's correct. So now I have for you, if you were with me in the past, you've seen it before. Pass these around, one each. This is a table of the Talmud, but of course the Talmud includes the Mishnah, and you have a list of all 63 Masechtot of the Mishnah. Divided into 6 orders.
Yeah, I have this.
How many chapters in the Mishnah? The first list, you can see after the name. Let's start from the top, okay? Tractate. First of all, Zraim is the name of the first order. It's in big capital letters. Seeds. Zraim means seeds. It's the agricultural order, one of the 6. The first Masechet is Brachot. Brachot means blessings. How many chapters in Mishnah are there? 9 chapters. Very good. And then the commentary, the Talmud. How many pages of Talmud? So the standard editions of the Talmud, of course, there's different editions. You can make more words on a page or less words on the page, but we're trying to follow what's become the standard over the course of the years. 64 pages of Talmud on those 9 chapters. And in the Yerushalmi, it's 68 pages of discussions of the Amoraim on the Mishnah. Is that clear? You look at the next one, number 2. Masechet number 2 is called Masechet Pe'ah. Hey, Amos, show everybody what you did with your highlighter. What did he highlight?
The how do you call it again? The
Orders.
Orders.
Sedarim. Right? You should notice that this is not just a list of 63.
How you say
There-
tractate? The order of tractate?
Masechet.
Masechet.
Hebrew for tractate is Masechet. I'll write it on the board. No.
What's
No,
the
no.
Masechet Zeraim and Moed?
Seder is order. And the individual, 63, Masechet is the singular. That's in English we say tractate. 63 of them. But this chart I gave you is not just a list of 63, it's divided into 6. The Roman numerals are 6. There's 6 orders. Each order has approximately 10 books in it. You see that? You see that now on the chart? Okay. Anybody want a highlighter? So that you can do what Amos did? Ask him. I don't have one. Yeah. Okay. Sum total of let's do number 2 before we get to the sum total. So Masechet number 2, what's it called? Pe'ah. What does Pe'ah mean?
It means the corner of the field.
Corner of the field. Very good. There's actually corner of the haircut also.
Yes.
Corner of the head. There's the corners of your beard. There's lots of corners. Good morning.
So it just means corner, right?
Pe'ah means corner, right? Correct. In the context, of course, this is about agricultural law. So this is the corner of the field. How many chapters? 8. Do we have any Talmud, any Gemara on it? Only the Yerushalmi. No Bavli. Shame. As you can see, go on Demai, Kilayim, Shvit, Terumot, Masrot, Maser, Shini, Chala, Ola, Bikurim.
The pages?
Yes, pages.
Or
Number of pages in the Bavli, right.
number of pages or number of comments?
Pages.
Pages,
look. Here's Masechet Brachot in the Talmud Bavli. Everybody look. Okay? As again, somebody asked me that there's of course, this page includes much more than the Talmud. It starts off with a Mishnah, Mei Matai. Mishnah continues up until here. There's a little Gimel Mem. Here starts the Gemara. The Gemara that's discussing this Mishnah. Okay, now that's going to continue. We're only looking at the middle section. That's the Talmud. After that, we're not talking about the commentators. They come later. They're printed now all on the same page. But we have the Mishnah and the Gemara. This is the Talmud. Mishnah and Gemara on the same page. And when the discussion continues, the Amoraim continue to speak. They bring Braitot. Almost every page has another Tannaitic source. Another Mishnah is quoted. They're discussing, analyzing, comparing, contrasting, until we get to, on page 9, I believe, is, keep going, words of the Amoraim without any break. Unfortunately, I believe it's on page 9. You can see each page has a number. It's numbered in Hebrew. That's right. It starts on Bet. Very cute. It's a cute phenomenon that here we go. You can see here is the next Mishnah. It's on page 9b. Right there. This is Tet. Tet is 9. It's one side of the page. That's 9a. The other side of the page is 9b. So we have 9 pages, actually 8 pages of discussions of the Gemara on Mishnah number 1. And here we have in the middle of the page, here's Mishnah 2. It's this much. Here's Mishnah number 2. And then it says again Gemara. And the Gemara continues to discuss it at length. So we have, how many pages of Gemara? So I go back to the end. How many am I going to find?
37?
No. It's on your chart. How many pages of Gemara?
319.
What does it say? No. This is brachot. The first Masechet.
64.
Absolutely. Look at this. Samech Dalet, 64. Okay, this is the last page. Oh, believe it or not, it's only up to here in the book. What's all the rest of this?
Commentary.
Lots of commentary. The truth is, because there's no more Gemara on any of the others, you also have the Mishnayot of all of Seder Zraim, 2 through 11. It's all in the back of this book. So this is all of the Gemara, Talmud Bavli on Masechet Brachot. There's much more, because it has all the Mishnayot. There's no more Gemara, but there's all the Mishnayot of the rest of Seder Zraim. But it's all little commentaries and the other Mishnayot of the other Masachtot. Yes?
You said that you own a single volume Talmud Bavli.
I do.
Should I bring that in tomorrow?
Okay, I'll try to remember. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I brought you this article. Pass this. Sorry? Yeah.
No, I mean,
I'll show you what it looks like.
it's-
It's amazing. There's actually quite a few editions. The one I have is I'll show you. I'll bring it in. I'll try to remember.
I asked this question once, and you were the third person this week to bring me something on this question.
Really? Somebody else brought? What else did they show you?
Ariel brought me apparently in one of the periodicals, the weekly periodicals.
Rabbi Freiman spoke about it. Yeah. What else?
Yeah.
And
Someone mentioned it.
and there's something
last
else.
week, yeah.
Okay.
Periodical.
All right. That's fine. Well, this is in English, and it's a much longer piece. The reason why it's cut up like that is because I noticed this comes from the book called the Aryeh Kaplan Reader. It's an article about the question: can God create a stone which He cannot lift?
Well, no one's given me an answer that I think is better than my own answer.
Okay. Good. Maybe you should keep an open mind. But all right, listen. I'm glad you have an answer. You know.
What's the question?
Because can God create a rock that He cannot lift? And my answer is, well, let's ask a better question. Can God end His own existence? And my answer to that
Similar.
is, well, when you're asking can, it's a very mortal concept. The idea of can, full, is too mortal. So you're asking by just asking the question can,
Mm-hmm.
you're already not talking about God. You're talking about something else.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting philosophical question. It's another discussion. It's not for now. But Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan has a nice piece on it in the Aryeh Kaplan Reader. It's a collection of his essays. Unfortunately, when they printed the book, they messed up the article, and it's out of order. So I had to cut it up, and I put it back into order. I think this is the only place in the world where you can get the proper version of this article. And it's such a nice article that I actually cut and paste. Physically, I photocopied from the book, and then I cut halfway through the article and pasted it properly. I believe it's clear that this is the proper order. There's just a printer's error, and nobody told them. I haven't bothered to tell them, but somebody should tell them maybe for the next printing. Okay. Back to Rabbi Akiva and Bar Yochai. Back to Shimon Bar Yochai. So we're at the Mishnah. We're looking at the Mishnah. The truth is, what does the title of the chart say? The Talmud. The Talmud includes Mishnah and Gemara. So you have here the names of the. Until today, we use this, by the way. Someone wants to write a book. Oftentimes, they will use this. Write a book on Masechet Pe'ah or Masechet Psachim or Masechet Shkalim, using the basic text of the Mishnah, the Talmud that goes on it, and of course, throughout the ages, other commentaries, which we're going to look into those when we get to it. Now we're dealing with the period of the sages. Mishnah, Gemara, Tanaim, Amoraim. All 2 parts of Chazal, the period of our sages.
What do you mean, Chazal?
Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha. Our sages of blessed memory. It's an acronym. Chachamim Zichronam Livracha. Sages of blessed memory. That's what we call them. Chazal. Tanaim and Amoraim, okay? So, let's keep looking at the chart just a little bit more. What are the 6 orders? Zraim is number 1. Seeds. Moed is seasons or times, set times. So you can see it discusses the festivals. Can you see where I'm reading now?
Yeah.
Where I'm looking at the chart that I'm looking at? Yeah? Oh, did you get one, Hirsch?
Yeah.
You got one. Where am I going to find Masechet Sukkah?
This is 17.
17. How many pages in the Talmud Bavli?
56.
56. Not so long. Only 26 in the Yerushalmi.
And those chapters
That's Mishnah. Chapters of Mishnah.
are Mishnah.
Yeah. How many chapters in the original Mishnah? How many chapters of Mishnah? As you can see, some of them are pretty short. Okay, Nashim.
About Shabbat is the leader.
Shabbat is quite large, yeah, 24. It's the longest Masechet. Not the longest totally. If you look in order, number 6, Masechet 52 is called
Kelim.
Masechet Kelim.
But there's no Talmud on it at all.
Correct. What we do have similar, but similarly we have, if you look at order number 4, what's that called?
Nezikin.
Seder Nezikin. It starts off with, in the ancient days actually, the first 3, number 31, 32, and 33, were part of one Masechet. What was it called? It was called Masechet Nezikin. In order Nezikin, there's Masechet Nezikin. It's confusing, right? And then they decided to split it up. It was also 30 chapters. They decided to divide it up into 3 gates. First gate, the middle gate, and the final gate.
The comments,
Now there's 10, 10, 10. Number 31, 32, and 33 used to be called Masechet Nezikin. Instead, we call them Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and Bava Batra, the first gate, the second gate, and the third gate. All right? So if you wanted to know about the laws of damages, that's where you would look. The laws of courts, Masechet number 34. Number 34, the laws of courts and the judicial system. What's it called? Masechet Sanhedrin. We've used that word before, right? Everybody knows that's the Supreme Court. Yafeh.
what's mean like the first gate? Then
I just explained.
I know. I hear.
They divided one Masechet into 3 parts. They called them 3 gates. They each have a topic. They each have a subtopic.
But damage.
Damages, when one person's damaged each other's property, you damage each other's person, who pays, civil law, torts, all sorts of things like that. Okay?
Civil, moral damage.
Property damage, sure, yeah, all those kind of things, yeah. Find for me Pirkei Avot. I told you before.
It's number 39. It's in Nezikin. It's the second last one.
Excellent. Avot, you see that? It's number 39.
There's no comment.
There is comments, there's no Gemara.
There's no Gemara.
There's no Gemara. We have lots of commentaries right on the table. Yeah, but they all come later, right? We don't have any Gemara. Not in the Bavli and not in the Yerushalmi. Why? It's a shame. It's a shame, really. The truth is, how many, it doesn't say this count on your page, but how many Masechtot out of the 63 do we have in the Talmud Bavli? Do we have Gemara on it? How many do we have out of the 63? You're going to have to count really quickly, or I'm going to give you the answer. Not the number of pages, the number of Masechtot that have pages, right? So Brachot, there's 1, and then none for the rest of 37. Excellent. You counted that quickly now?
Yes.
Excellent. Good for you.
By the way,
You were quick. How did you do it? How?
How do we remember this?
How?
We remember this because what do we get from the Talmud? We get laws. And if you were to write laws in Hebrew, it would be Lamed Zayin, which is the Gemara 37.
Well done.
Which I just came up with on the spot.
Lovely. Laws. Lamed Zayin. 37. 37 Masechtot out of the 63. Not very much, right? There's a lot of parts of the Mishnah where we don't have Gemara. So we don't have that lens, right, of the Bavli to look at the Mishnah. So there, all we're left with is the commentaries which come later, the later commentaries. We have many. Rishonim, Achronim, Gaonim. We have commentaries on the Mishnah, but no Gemara. No Gemara on many of the Masechtot. If you look, which orders are the most lacking of Gemara?
Well, Zerayim has only one.
Zerayim. Good. Zerayim has very
has almost no from the Yerushalmi. However, Tahorot only has one that's covered at all, and that's Nida.
Right. Both Seder Zerayim, the order of seeds, and the Seder Tahorot, number 6, has Gemara on only one of the Masechtot each. In Zerayim, it's Masechet Brachot, and in Taharot, it's Masechet Nida. Maybe you want to have a guess of why. The Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, we don't have a lot of material on Seder Zerayim and Seder Taharot, except for Brachot and Nida. Why?
Well, for Zerayim, because we weren't in Eretz Yisrael, basically all those rules were not applicable.
Excellent. That's right. So, of course, they were applicable, and there were Jews living in the land of Israel. But primarily, we're going to find the focus in the Talmud Yerushalmi, which was in the land of Israel. In Bavel, it was less practical. They didn't make that a priority. They studied it. What about Taharot?
We didn't have a temple.
Therefore,
we don't have all these.
The laws of purity and impurity were not applicable.
But Nida was applicable because
Nida was, of course, still applicable because a woman is prohibited to her husband if she's impure. And so we need to have those laws discussed at great length. So unfortunately, we don't have the Gemara on all of the Mishnah. The primary lack is in Seder Taharot and Seder Zerayim. Do you understand that? You see that? Am I speaking Chinese, or are you getting the... so excuse me, Israel. Speaking Chinese means a foreign language that nobody understands. Do you see what I'm doing here? Do you get this? Do you get this?
Yes.
So Torot is...
Taharot is all about purity.
No comments because there's no better than that.
Don't say comments. You're going to confuse yourself. There's no Gemara. Correct.
Yeah.
There's no Gemara because there was no Beit HaMikdash. That's right. This is the period of the sages. The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed.
It's related to the...
And the concepts of purity and impurity are primarily associated with the temple.
And what's the because I went away from the Terumot, I think is the one of the purity.
No,
Which one is it?
no, Tahorot. It's order number 6. 51 through 63. You see that? The title is Tahorot.
Oh yes,
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah. Number 6 on the list is Terumot, which is one of the tithes that you have to give to the priests.
What you say?
Number 6 is Terumot.
Of yes, because
Truma and Maaser, you've heard of those? Yeah.
Because it's just agriculture. It's just to
Agriculture,
land.
that's
And
right.
This is to do with
The laws of purity and impurity, yeah.
Interesting. Why Kiddushin there is no comments in Yerushalmi? There's no Gemara.
It is fascinating, right? It's. I think it's just the fate of history. There's a statement in the Talmud that says Hakol talui b'mazal. Everything depends on luck or your constellations. Afilu sefer Torah shebahichal. Even the scroll of the Torah, which is in the ark, the holy ark, Also, it depends on the vicissitudes of history. Things happen. The scholarship it's amazing how much they accomplished being persecuted, being killed for studying Torah. The fact that we have the Torah of Rabbi Akiva in so many places, despite what he went through, the Roman persecution, living through the Bar Kochva Revolt and the Roman legions, not only him, but everybody lived and they pursued wisdom under such trying conditions is really a mark of it's a miracle, really. And we have so much, and then in the period of the Gemara after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, also the persecution of the Roman Empire didn't stop. There were times better, times that were worse, but we just don't have it. It didn't get written, or it didn't survive. We're not sure. Nobody's found one yet. Maybe one day we'll find one, and we'll say, "Oh, it was written, but it didn't survive." Maybe we'll find a manuscript. Who knows? But as far as we know, there is no Talmud collection on.
It seems that it's lost.
Yeah, it's lost. It's lost. If they had it written, it was lost, and if maybe it was never written, it was never edited, put together, collated. By the way, we said that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the one responsible for creating the Mishnah, the book, right? Who was responsible for the editing of the Talmud?
Oh, you mentioned it. It was the just and I can't read it over there.
No. They edited it. The Savoraim were a group of people that edited, but they had to. You can only edit a book after it's been sealed. No, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the Mishnah. What about the Gemara over here? I'm going to give you names of Amoraim, the last Amoraim, who are known as Sof Hora'ah. Talmud says that they are the last of the Amoraim. The end of the Talmud, Ravina and Rav. So you can obviously see that they're in Bavel. Rav, I taught you yesterday that the moniker, the title shows you that it's a Babylonian title. And Rav Ashi. Ravina and Rav Ashi. Two Amoraim here in the 7th. Rav Ashi. Now don't confuse it with Rashi. Don't confuse it with it. Ravina and Rav Ashi. They compiled the Talmud. They compiled the Gemara, which is the latter part of the Talmud. Ravina and Rav Ashi. Of course, it's confusing. I'm not going to get into it. There was actually 2 Ravinas and 2 Rav Ashis in these later periods. The 7th generation of Amoraim. There's 6th generation. There's 5th generation. Compiled, edited, however you want to say. They sealed, completed. Let's say completed. They completed the Talmud in their day. They're the last Amoraim quoted in the Talmud. Okay? Yeah.
Bear with me. Ezra is to the Tanakh, and these guys are to the Talmud.
Yes. Yes. Excellent. That's right. Very good. Okay. We're getting a handle on it. Now I want to teach you the entire Shas. What's Shash? Shas? We had it up here. Shisha. 6 is Shisha. Right? So, Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. This is an acronym. It's called Shas. The Shas is another way of calling the Mishnah. The entire Mishnah is the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, or in short, Shas. You might have heard of a political party with the name Shas. Why did they choose that name? Because they're a religious party. And they wanted to choose a traditional name. They chose the name Shas. The original meaning is Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah. I want to teach you the entire Talmud in the next 5 minutes. Are you ready? Do you think we can do it?
It's a lot.
If it takes 5 minutes, maybe.
Are you ready? You could do it in 5 minutes?
Where
You know, there's something called Daf Yomi. What is Daf Yomi?
It's where you do daf every yom.
Right. Exactly. What's a daf? What's a daf?
A daf is two amud.
page?
A daf is a page. They call it a folio in English. A folio. It has two sides. This is side A, and this is side B. About 100 years ago, Rabbi Meir Shapiro from
Fire.
no.
Europe.
No. There's a different mayor. There's Rabbi Meir Shapiro was from Lublin. He decided, I want to have. It's a crazy idea. It's really unbelievable. He had a yeshiva in Lublin. First, they were in a dinky little building, and then he gathered money. More and more students came, and he built an amazing, massive, I think it's a 5-story building, takes up a whole block, still exists today in Lublin. You can go visit. It's a medical school. After the Holocaust, they took the building and turned it into a medical school. People go and they have tours there, and this is the yeshiva of Rabbi Meir Shapiro in Lublin. Still exists today. It's just 100 years ago. He's the one, he had a brainchild. He said, I want to have this system. I want everybody to be studying the Talmud. It's called Daf Yomi. He said, we're going to set 1 page of Talmud a day. 1 page a day. Daf, this is a daf. Sorry?
Today is Yevamot 71.
That's correct. Yevamot 71. My son does it every day. My wife does it every day, believe it or not. You can go to, I'll send you maybe a link. It's called Portal. It's a portal, a website. Portal Hadaf Hayomi, the daily page of Talmud. And there you can get hundreds, I kid you not, hundreds of shiurim on each and every daf. Video, audio, English, Yiddish, French, Spanish, and English, of course. Many, many different rabbis teaching. And if you go around the world, every Jewish community in the world, almost, you'll have, not only are they reading the portion of the week in Parashat HaShavua, we're on the same schedule of Parashat HaShavua. This is thousands of years old. This is only 100 years old, but it's working. There might be a class on Hadaf Hayomi. The same page of Talmud is studied around the world by Jews everywhere because Reb Meir Shapiro had this brainchild. And now with the global infrastructure, it's really appropriate for the age. And so there is this system that if you study 1 page a day, the entire Talmud includes how many pages?
It's 2,711.
You have it right here on your page. 2,720 pages. How long will it take you? 1 daf a day. Every day.
7 years.
7.5 years.
7.5 years.
So they've done this a couple cycles already.
Many. This is already maybe the 15th cycle. I don't know exactly how many, but
Have you done a whole cycle?
I have not done a whole cycle, no.
So
I did many times, different sections, but I haven't
How
completed
long it
it.
takes? 7 years?
Yeah, 1 page a day, 7 years. Yeah.
Okay, 1 page. Okay. So if you want to finish Siraim, how you want?
Sraim is easy. We're talking about Talmud now. The only Masechet that has Talmud is 64 pages. You can do the Talmud, this volume, Talmud Brachot, 64 days. 2 months, no big deal. And then you move on to Moed, because there's no more Gemara. It's only 37 out of the 63 Masechtot. Right? Unfortunately, this system does not include the Mishnayot of where there's no Talmud. Seder Zraim and Seder Taharot. You have to study that without, in a different system. But if you want to cover the entire Talmud Bavli, it's 7+ years. And every 7+ years, they're making a massive worldwide Siyum Hashas. They call it Shas. Yeah. Last time they had it in Madison Square Gardens in New York, the biggest, one of the biggest event venues, where they have sports. All the Jews gathered, with the greatest rabbis. And in Israel, they have more than one. They have it in Israel too. I just speaking to the Americans, In Israel, they have it in Yad Eliyahu Stadium, the biggest stadium in Israel. And they have there's a massive gathering and celebration of Siyum, meaning finishing, Hashas. Shas, what's Shas? So in this context, they're talking about the entire Talmud. But the original context is really Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. Mishnah, there's also, by the way, a system. I think it's a great thing. Before you start on the Talmud, I think you should work on the Mishnayot, Mishnah. And there's something called Mishnah Yomit. Mishnah Yomit. If you study one Mishnah a day, how many Mishnayot are there? Well, we don't know. It doesn't say here how many Mishnah there are. If you study a chapter a day, how long will it take you?
120 days.
A chapter a day.
527 chapters.
129.
About a year and a half.
Right now they're at Mishnah Shevi'it. The daily Mishnah is
Chapter?
Mishnah Shevi'it, 4 and 3 to 4.
That's if you do a Mishnah a day or 2 Mishnahs a day. But I'm saying if you do an entire chapter of Mishnah a day, it's about 10 Mishnah in a chapter.
So chapter 1 from
526.
Exactly. Chapter 1 of Barachot and the Mishnah, if you do that one chapter every day, a year and a half, you finish the entire Shas Mishnah. There's Shas Mishnah and Shas Gemara. Shas Gemara, on the one hand, it's shorter because it's only 37 out of the 63 Masechtot. On the other hand, it's longer because there's more pages. As you can see, 3,000 pages instead of 500 chapters, right?
They do like a Simra Talmud, Simra Torah.
That's right. They did Siyum HaShas Talmud, right? That's the Daf Yomi cycle of Talmud Bavli, right? But I want to teach you the entire Shas in the next 5 minutes. Think I can do it? I can. And you'll remember it for life. Are you ready? Follow along. Are you ready? Follow along. Look at your chart. Oh. You might know the tune. Do you know the tune? Oh, Dishama Biyane.
We sang it one time, right?
We sang it. So it goes like this. Brachot Pe'ah. Number 1. Number 2. Brachot Pe'ah. You see where I'm reading? Number 3. Demai Kilayim Shevi'it Terumot Ma'asrot Ma'aser Sheini Chala Orla Bikurim. Number 12. Shabbat Eruvim Pesachim Shekalim Yom HaSukkah Beitza Rosh Hashanah Ta'anit Megillah Moed Katan Chagiga.
Then,
We keep going. You can say it. Yeah. Now number 24. Everybody see where I'm doing it? Yevamot ketuvot nedarim Nazir Sota Gitin Ki Hidushin Bava Kama Bava Metzia Bava Batra Sanhedrin Makot Shevuot Eiduyot Avodah Zarah Avot Horayot. Everybody see where we are? Number 41. Zevachim Menachot Chulin Bechorot Arachin Temura Keritot Meila Tamid Midot Kinim. Ready for the last one?
yes.
Kelim Oholot Negaim Para Tahorot Mikvaot Nida Machshirim Zavim Tevul Yom Yadayim ukatzin. Even less than 5 minutes. It took us 2 minutes. You know all of Shas. You just know, we just read through all of Shas. Okay, at least the names of the Masechtot.
That's important.
63 Masechtot. If you sing this every day, you'll know the 6 orders of the Mishnah off by heart. That's homework. Actually, last time I taught this, I gave a challenge. Whoever could recite them off by heart got a prize. Let's do this again. If you learn this 63 Masechtot song off by heart, you will receive a prize.
What's the price? Full edition of the Talmud?
We can think about it.
Complete shots, that's what you learn. Digital.
If you read the whole thing, then I'll get you a full shas. But for the titles, for just the titles of the Masechtot, I'll give you a prize, but not.
By the way, is the website that you was talking about, the Daf Yomi, is that the one that you can get the Talmud? Because there was a whole hype, like study, you have to follow some lessons from the Daf Yomi, and then you receive the Talmud.
Could be. I don't know. No, I don't know.
So a whole hype
Yeah, but the point is to have it inside your brain, in your heart, not inside your library. Library is nice too. I have a few editions of the Talmud at home. I'm going to try to remember to bring one in.
I want to see it. It's just the dubbing, right? It's like there's no additional commentary.
There are many of commentaries.
In the single volumes.
I'll show you.
Because this is what you say. That's what I realized. Like when you say about in Judaism, our book is the Talmud, because it shows you like you can read the Torah, you can recite the Torah, but to explain the Torah is
That's
level
right.
like you understand what you have read.
That's
So
right.
that's the Mishnah. So
That's right.
About you took it and then you make it in your own, and that's a much higher level.
Absolutely.
Because-
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yafeh. Questions, comments? We're discussing the period of the sages. We're going to focus in a little bit now on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And we're going to have a switch. We're going to make a switch now to discussing a little bit the festival coming up tomorrow night. Right? Wednesday night.
Wednesday, right? Yeah.
It's already. Tomorrow day is Tuesday. So tomorrow, Wednesday night, is a festive day. And I want to explain to you a little bit about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and how we celebrate it practically and what the meaning is. So it's not off topic. It's just focusing in on the 4th generation of the Tanaim, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The truth is, we're going to see that it's later in history that it really gets developed. What am I referring to? What is usually attributed? What book is usually attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? His words are mentioned in the Mishnah and in the Braitot and in the Midrash. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is mentioned all the time. Right. The Zohar, the work of the Zohar, the mystical work of the Zohar, is attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Fascinatingly, when did it first appear? Wait.
In the Middle Ages, 1200s?
13th century. It's the 1200s. Yeah, that's right. It first appeared as a book in the 1300s. Now, the book appeared, and they said, this is the work of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. How many years later? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in about year 200, 175. So at least 1,000 years later. Quite a claim. Quite a claim. What's amazing is that this claim was accepted. It was accepted. Now, you can't make such a claim. People can be naive. People can be innocent, but they're not stupid. Some people are stupid, Hirsch. I agree with you. Some people are stupid. The average person. Absolutely. What about the scholars? What about the sages? They all accepted it. We don't find any debate about this.
Wait, about what?
That the Zohar is a tributary to Shimon Bar Yochai, not in the 13th century, not in the 14th century, not in the 15th century. We haven't gotten to him yet. There's no Jews in Yemen yet. Hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm going through the centuries from the 13th century. Next came the 16th century, 15th, 16th century. This book has been studied. It's attributed to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Nobody debates it. Along comes the next great Kabbalist. What we all know, the Zohar is a book of Kabbalah. It's a book of mystical teachings. There's not much halacha in there. There is some halacha, but it's a very different type of book. Along comes the Arizal. You might have heard of him. Where did he live? That's right, from Egypt to Tzfat. Ha'eloki, Ari stands for Ha'eloki Rabbi Yitzchak. His name was Rabbi Yitzchak Ashkenazi, believe it or not. The Ari, known as the Arizal, Zal, just like Chazal, Zichronam Livracha. So, Ari, Eloki, Rabbi Yitzchak, Zichrono Livracha. The Arizal, he accepted the Zohar as the words of the holy Tana. The holy Tana, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Many times he's given that title because he was a Tana. And he, not only did he study the book, he explained it like no one else before him. The Arizal, you could say, in a manner of speaking, it's just coming to my head right now, sort of like wrote a Gemara on the Mishnah. He wrote interpretations of the Zohar, which today are considered to be authoritative, like no other commentary on the Zohar ever was. The writings of the Arizal are sort of like the Talmud that came to explain the Mishnah. Zohar is considered like, if it's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it is a Mishnah. It is like a Tanaitic material. The Arizal explained it. Still, one second, let me finish. 15th, 6th century, 16th century, we find no hint of any debate that the Zohar is the words of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. For the first time in the 17th century, we start to see people raising questions. 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, until today, this who wrote the Zohar is being debated heatedly everywhere in the Beit Midrash and in the academia. Everybody's arguing about who really wrote the Zohar. This is a recent phenomenon, that this is a matter of debate. Our tradition tells us, hundreds of years of tradition, I think you can't ignore that. It's attributed to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'll take questions and then I'll say a little bit more, yeah.
So regarding the Arizal, first question, when did he live, what year? And the second question is, he wrote Gemara.
No, I called it that.
Yeah, okay. So
He taught. We have Ma'amarim, we have essays of his. He actually wrote very, very little.
He wrote nothing, right?
And he died at a very young age. It's amazing. He was such a phenomenal. But his students wrote down all of his teachings. His primary student was called Rav Chaim Vital. Excellent.
His teachings were written down
Yes,
in
yes.
Hebrew?
In Hebrew, yes.
Okay.
Well, the Zohar is Aramaic, and the explanations of it is a combination of Hebrew and Aramaic. But, sorry?
Are there medieval Portuguese words?
Why Portuguese?
Okay, so I'll go back to my discussion, but let me answer the question first. So the 16th century, the end of the 15th and the beginning of the 16th century, around the 1500, around the year 1500 is where it's on the border between the Rishonim and the Achronim, right? Like there's always a debate about the Shulchan Aruch. We spoke about him briefly. Is it part of the? Is it a Rishon or an Achron? Anyways, same thing with the Arizal. They were brothers-in-law. Sorry, not brothers-in-law. Their children married each other. What's that called? Mechutanim in Hebrew. They were like their children married each other. The Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo's son married the Arizal's daughter, or the opposite. So they were contemporaries. In any case, the Arizal was the great expert on Kabbalah And Rav Yosef Kar was a great expert on law, and he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, which we use until today as the code of law of the Jewish people, right? So this 16th century was another. We'll get there. Okay, we still 1,000 years before that. Okay, we're still 1,000 years before that. It won't take us 1,000 years to get there. We just take a few days for each period. You can see we're making tremendous headway, aren't we? We're doing pretty well. We did already 1,500 years of Jewish history. Now we're going to be completing 2,000 years of Jewish history today, tomorrow. Okay, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, yeah, and the Zohar.
They say how do you read, you write the Zohar and where or?
Yes, so we have traditions about Rabbi Shimon. Yes, we have traditions about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and we're gonna study some of them. I'm gonna bring into you the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his hiding out in the cave to study Torah, like his teacher Rabbi Akiva, right? And how they hid from the persecution of the Romans and studied Torah, taught Torah. They were very, very powerful personalities, unbelievable. But when we talk about this debate, who wrote it? Today, in the perspective of history and hundreds of years of debate, after hundreds of years of tradition, it's very clear to everybody. There is no such thing as the book of the Zohar. And so you can't say who wrote the book of the Zohar. What is there? There are books of the Zohar tradition. The Zohar is a compilation of a number of different sections. Everybody who studies Zohar knows that. There's actually titles within the Zohar. There's the Raya Mehemna, there's the Tikkunei Zohar. There's different sections within the book. If you go to the store and you buy the book called the Zohar, within it there's going to be different sections. And within those sections, there's subsections. And there's actually quite a jumble. And it's quite clear that these mystical writings of Judaism, there is a kernel which is very ancient. I have no doubt some of these mystical traditions go back to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Otherwise, the Jewish scholars for hundreds of years wouldn't just accept that and swallow it. You can't create something from nothing. In such a scholarly people like we are, where scholarship is like the highest thing. We're not talking about people on the street. Oh, you could sell them. I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, right? I could. It's an American metaphor of selling you something that doesn't exist, right? I could sell you a used car.
I got some oceanfront property in
That's
Arizona.
Right. You cannot do that in Jewish tradition. And so I believe that there is a kernel of the Zoharic writings, which is very, very ancient, all the way back 1,000 years before a book was ever published by the name of the Zohar. But it's also clear to me, Hirsch was saying, in the Zohar, if you read the book that we have now, if you buy the book, there are people mentioned which were not alive in the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. There are rabbis mentioned there that lived after him. So could Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai write the book about people that are, hundreds of years later?
Maybe there's layers to it.
Maybe he was a prophet, but maybe not, because we don't have prophecy anymore, right? We're past the period of prophecy, right? We're in the period of the sages. Prophecy is finished. So it's not prophecy. Probably it's a compilation. Probably other texts, other mystical writings were inserted, were compiled in there. But is there, our tradition is very strong that we have. There's a core there that goes back all the way back to the period of the sages. Yeah.
You can see that different style of writing.
Also, there's been computer programs run on the text, and literary analysis has been done. Everything that you can imagine has been done to try to figure out the different parts of the Zohar and who wrote this part and that, but this was earlier, this was later. 100%. A lot has been done. Is there a conclusive answer? No. Till today. We don't have a conclusive answer. And that's why I say, part of it clear, the tradition is very clear, attributed to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Part of it, I think, might be later.
The mystery of its origins.
The mystery of its origins.
It's mystic teachings, I don't know.
That's right. It's a mystical book. It makes sense that it's a mystery. Mystery is the same word as mysticism, right? Mystic.
So what does the Zohar, how and what does the Zohar teach? Is it teaching Midrashim or?
Good. So it's very similar to Midrash. It's very similar to Midrash. Mostly Midrash Agadah, but there is some halacha there. Meaning that it's what did we say about, what's the difference between Midrash and Mishnah? What's the primary difference? Right, we said they're both from the Tannaitic era. Some of them, the Midrashim, are from the Tannaitic era. What's the difference? The major difference? Yesterday, we just learned it.
Yesterday.
They didn't enter in the
It's not in the Mishnah, that's for sure. But what? There's a major difference.
Mishnah is like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mentioned it yesterday. No, I mentioned it yesterday.
So Midrash was written down and the Mishnah was only before it was open.
Because Mishnah is just is literally
The Mishnah is
the
written
oral
and
tradition, like
it's written.
I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. Think about the structure.
Mishnah has a structure.
What's the structure?
Six.
The 6 orders. We just discussed the 6 orders. Who created the 6 orders of the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rebbe, right? Wow, what a brainchild. Categories, topics.
They're
This
not
is-
canon. They're not in the canon.
No.
Midrash doesn't have.
Midrash
What is
has
it? What's the
24.
what?
Midrash has
Yeah,
the
yeah.
story.
It's 24 chapters based on the Tanakh. 24
The
chapters.
Midrash is written as a commentary or as an expansion of the books of the Tanakh. There's no separate structure of 6 orders or, make it up. The Rambam made 14 books afterwards. The Midrash is written sort of like a commentary on the Chumash. So you ask me, what is the Zohar? The Zohar is very similar. It's like a commentary on the Torah. You have Zohar in Parshat Breshit, on Parshat Noach, on Parshat Bamidbar, on Parshat Bahar, Parshat Bechukotai. Every parsha has a few pages of Zoharic teachings on it. Yeah, on each parsha, like we have Parshat HaShavua. We have Zohar that is written on the substructure of the Torah, the Chumash. Okay? There's also some sections which are unique, separate essays. It's quite a complex series of books, like as I was indicating before. It's a compilation. But the basic structure of the Zohar is the Chumash. Just like the basic structure of the Midrash is the Chumash. And there's also Midrash on the other books of the Tanakh as well.
So we have this
Yeah.
four
There's a
levels.
follow-up question, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. We have those 4 levels of interpretation of the Torah. Patterns like Pshat, Remes, Darash, and Sod.
Yafe.
Is Sod basically the Zohar is on a
That's right, it's categorized as Sod. It's categorized as Sod, correct. Sod means secrets, right? It's the mystical part of Judaism. We'll talk more about the content and we'll do some mysticism tomorrow with Hashem. Another question, yeah. Renan.
I hear about the Midrash that we should believe and not believe in the same.
You are, again, you're speaking about Midrash Agadah, the non-legal sections of the Midrash. And it's not a question of believing. Of course, we believe it. These are the words of our holy sages. They could do miracles. Didn't we just study about the miracles yesterday? Rabbi Eliezer made the walls fall down. These were very powerful individuals. They were not involved in nonsense. Midrash is not nonsense. Question is, and I'll just help you with the English. Question is, which parts of the Midrash are to be taken literally and which ones are figuratively? Do you understand what those words mean in English? Right? Sometimes it's a metaphor. Right. That's to be studied. Yeah. את מי לשלוח? את הרש.
Rabbi Levi? Yes, sir. Rabbi. So in a few minutes you'll meet
Shakoach. Okay, we're finishing up. Yeah, we're finishing up. Yes, Michael, question.
That's interesting what you say about how we look like an example, because that's what you see like in the Western world. They have a different mindset. They read stories like looking to facts, factualities.
Right.
In the Eastern mindset, they just bring a message, tell a story. So it's not strange that, especially in the 1700, 1800 years, the time when the big illumination,
Right.
become rational.
We start to look at things differently.
Yeah,
Yeah, we look at it with like a scientific eye and trying to analyze it. But the basic core of the tradition is the content.
Yeah, the content.
And that's what matters. And that's it's an open question. We'll talk more about the Zohar and Rosh Hashanah and Lag BaOmer, of course, tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay.
I want to apologize that I'm coming later because I'm